Hey guys, what's up? Today we will be making my first ever Damascus blade. I will be using these lawnmower blades. I'm not actually going to be using the knife for anything, and this is my first attempt, so I don't need to make it out of the best material ever, because I heard the higher the carbon content, the harder it is to forge. I'll be using a combination of that and this sawmill bandsaw blade. There's actually a couple here, they're just wired together. I'll be taking just strips of this, after flattening them out a little bit, because as you can see they're crooked, and putting them together, and hopefully my first Damascus. I actually got something. I recently got this off of Amazon. It's ferric chloride. I don't know anything about how this works or how to use it. I mean, I sort of do, but not really. I'm going to do some research on this once it's time, but that's a problem for later me. This is going to take a little while to heat up because there's a lot of cold metal in the forge, so I guess I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so I got my metal flattened out. I'm just going to take basically as long of a section as I can get out of these very end pieces and grind them off, smooth them out so that they're flat, and then try to see if I can forge weld them together. Got them all cut down. As you can probably see, they're not perfectly flat, so I'll probably take them back to the forge and finish flattening them out more. Yeah, right here you can see, kind of like goes out a little bit. It's not flat. Need to forge that down. Okay guys, we have this.
Okay, let's pause for a minute. If any of you are wondering how we got from the sheets of steel to that box-like thing, I literally just took all the steel, ground them down to size, and layered them on top of each other.
Billet ground down and cut into pieces. We need to now make sure that there is no dirt in between them, so I'm going to go clean that up. And then we're going to go and weld the corners together and put a seam down the center so that it doesn't, so that the layers don't bow like this and we have area for the oxygen to get in. If oxygen gets in between our layers, scale will build up, and if you have scale between your layers in your billet, you will not be able to forge weld it, for it just won't, it won't let it stick together. It'll just peel apart when I start forging it. So we need to make sure we have this very clean before we weld it, and then proceed to put it in the forge and then forge weld it.
Now I am welding together all the layers of the Damascus. I think there's 7 in total. Not very many, but there's plenty enough for a first try. Yeah. I haven't figured out how to weld yet. I sort of know how, and I can sort of do it, but it just was not working for me today. I'm putting this piece of rebar stub on the end so I can hold onto that with my tongs instead of directly holding onto the billet. It gives it a much easier handle and grip for holding rather than holding onto the piece of metal itself. I am getting out some used engine oil so I can dip the billet in there. Basically coats the billet with oil, and then when I put it in the furnace, it burns off the oil, but leaves a soot layer that makes it so that the oxygen can't get in. You can see the flames coming out of the furnace where the oil is burning off. Putting these bricks in front just to make it keep the heat in a little more, because without it they don't keep the heat all that great. Right now I'm taking it out. As you can see, that brick is glowing hot. It's super hot in there. I think it was 1,500 degrees. I'm just lightly tapping all the way down the billet, just trying to get an even pressure over the entire thing. I don't want to hold it too long on the anvil on one side because the anvil's a big heat sink and it's rather cold at the moment, which means it'll pull the heat out of the bottom layer or the bottom 2 layers, so they won't forge weld potentially. So I need to make sure to turn it over and hit on both sides to make sure they stick before it gets too cold.
Well, let's see what happened.
Right now I'm grinding off the outside scale, trying to see if there's any delaminations in the steel. If there's any delaminations in the billet, I will have to put it back in the forge. After re-dipping it in oil, everything's stuck together tight enough. Hopefully no oxygen was able to get in the inside, making it so that scale is built up. If it did, I'm gonna have to start over on the billet. So I'm just really hoping at this point that everything just went smoothly.
To be honest, I think that's forge plotted, and I think those lines are just showing the different metals, but I'm not 100% sure. I guess we'll see when we forge it out the rest of the way. I'm heating it back up again so I can forge it out flat to make my blade. I'm not going to do necessarily a ton of forging to forge out the shape because that will distort the pattern. I'm going to forge it out flat, basically curve up the tip, I think. Yeah, I'm going to forge it out flat, curve out the tip, and then I'm just going to grind out the rest. I might forge out the tank, but I'm not going to put any like slope on the edge where I'm going to have the blade, because if I do that, that defeats the purpose of having the layers that you grind into. Because if I have 4 layers of metal like this, if I combine them, if I squish them together so that they come to a point, when I grind it flat, I'm only going to be able to see 1 layer instead of cutting it like this, where you can see across all the layers. I had to grind away some material from the centerpiece because it just didn't forge very well, but I think it was only in the center, and I think I was able to grind out all the T-lambs, so I think this is a solid piece of steel now. Here's our billet all forged out. I decided not to forge any shape into it because it is kind of delicate having those layers in there, and I wouldn't want it to pop apart any more than they have, because I've been having troubles and having to re-weld them together. I think they might have worked, but we'll see. So I'm just gonna let it cool down and then grind it to shape, and we'll see what happens then.
If you were wondering why one side of the billet looks bigger than the other, looks like I flattened it out more, it's not so much that as the fact that I had to take so much more steel off the other side. It is about the same thickness all the way down the billet though. I'm actually going to normalize it first and then just get it up really hot and then just let it cool down slowly. So I'm going to leave it in the forge after I turn the forge off and just put this cover on it. We got our billet drawn out into a thin-ish piece of metal. Just going to grind it down. It's going to be a thicker knife, so you can really appreciate the pattern in it, which is not all that big. That's just how I think it's going to work. I'm just going to cut it into a shape that I have in my brain, and we're going to see what happens.
have the edge ground down on this, so now it's kind of a wedge shape on the blade. I didn't grind it down all the way because for some reason, if it's ground down all the way and you have this like very thin spot, when you quench it, it won't go right. The next thing we're going to be doing is the quenching, which is, for those of you who don't know, basically gives the blade the hardness. Right now, this blade is not very hard. After I quench it, it becomes brittle. Then I put it in the oven at 400 for 2 hours, and that makes it kind of knocks the brittleness off of it, so it won't break if I drop it on the ground.
I'm going to do the tempering now by putting it in the oven at 400 degrees for 2 hours. Afterwards, you can see that it got a golden brown, which is a really good sign. That means that it tempered perfectly, which means the next step is to finish grinding it down, because right now it's still way too thick. I'm going to hand sand it down to 1000 grit. I just need it a little more finer than my belt sander can get. My belt sander leaves like machine-like marks in the blade, even if I go nice and smooth. Doing the hand sanding just makes it a little more handmade and just a little more nicer looking, in my opinion. Okay, that took a really long time, but now it is done being sanded. I got it sanded down to a 1000 grit finish, which is fine enough that it will not be able to show up any of the scratches in it with the edge. Apparently, in the etching process, scratches will be able to show up fairly easily in the Damascus blade, so I don't want that. Right here, I am cleaning it with a nail polish remover wipe. I heard you can use this to clean your blades because you really need to make sure there is no oil or anything on your blades, because if there is, the edge just won't etch right and you'll have these splotches where it did not etch. So I need to make sure that is very clean. Right after I clean it, I directly go ahead and put it into the ferrite chloride immediately, and I'm going to leave it in there for about 10 minutes, come back out, then sand it with 2000 grit sandpaper to get the oxidation off, and put it right back in, and I'm going to repeat this process multiple times. About 10 minutes later, I come back out to the garage, take it out of the ferrite chloride, I rinse it off, and then sand it down, and yes, I am starting to see a little bit of a pattern. I'm going to keep repeating this until I can see enough of the pattern that I want to see, until I'm satisfied with how the pattern looks.
This is what it looks like straight out of the ferrite chloride. The reason you can't see the pattern very well is because of a layer of oxidation covering the blade. This is the last etch I'm going to do. We lightly, ever so lightly, rub it with 2000 grit sandpaper for the last etch. And just do that till you're satisfied with the amount of oxidation that's been taken off. Oh, that looks cool. That looks really cool, actually.
I decided to go ahead and remove that little heel as I could not figure a handle design that would implement that little spike on the back of the heel, so I just decided to go take it off. I'm going to be using some purple heart wood to make the handle out of. It's going to be basically my just general handle design that I do for most of my blades. Right here I'm marking out the center of the wood with the thickness of the tang. I'm trying to make sure I don't over drill too much of the wood because I'm going to put the hole in the handle now to fit the tang in. So I'm just tracing the outside of the tang on both sides, just making sure I know the exact size I want on the actual handle.
Tang's too long, so I have to cut it down. Oops. I've got it cut and ground down more to size, and it fits on pretty good, doesn't wiggle all that much. A little bit of room between this and that. So maybe just compact it. Let's put it in this way with this rugged stuff up on top, just for so I remember. Pretty much just my regular handle design. Up, down, which to be honest I think is a lot of people's regular designs, with a little bit of a curve on the back. Just a little bit. Then obviously the end. Okay, let's go cut that out. A report on what I've got so far. I have the blade, I finished, not sharpened yet, wrapped in tape to protect the Damascus edge. I have the handle ground down to shape, fitting pretty well. I'm just going to sand it down fine enough so that I can stain it and then put some glossy finish on it.
Before I go ahead and attach the handle to it, I take it to the belt sander with 1,000 grit sanding belt, and I give it the last sharpening on the edge that actually gives it the edge, because right now it doesn't really have an edge, it's just ground down thinner. It makes it a lot easier to do without the handle than with the handle, just because the handle gets in the way when you're trying to do this. So I like to do it before I attach the handle. It is time to glue the handle onto the blade before I actually finish the handle, because epoxy will get all over the handle and I'll have to clean it off, which will probably damage the finish. So I like to add the finish after I finish the gluing of the handle together. Getting the excess epoxy off the side, and I'm going to take the blade, put some directly on the tang. As you can see, I put little dips in the side of the tang. That just basically makes it so the epoxy will grip onto the blade stronger, because it's not strong enough by itself to just grip onto something smooth. So I put dips in it to help with it. Gonna put them together and just let it set overnight so it can cure all the way. The next morning, I come back out and I'm going to stain it with a dark walnut stain, basically just to get it a nice dark color. This is purple, so it should come up purple once the handle is actually finished. The next day, I come back out and apply a layer of polyurethane. This is gonna give it a matte type texture instead of a glossy texture. So I'm not gonna put enough on to make it glossy, basically, but it will seal up the handle and it'll still look nice.
Here is our finished blade. I got the blade ground down. As you can see, I have this like silvery thing for the blade. I have both sides etched. I don't exactly know how I would only etch one side anyway, but I mean, yeah. Both etched. One side's a little darker than the other. That looks really cool. The pattern does show out pretty nicely. I have this purple heart handle. It's not glossy, but it's kind of a matte texture, I guess you could say. I absolutely love this thing. It is one of my best accomplishments. Thank you guys for watching to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. You spent a very long time, 30 minutes actually, watching my video. It does help a lot. I need a lot more watch hours, like a lot, before I can get monetized. And I would like to start making money off of YouTube this year, which seems pretty possible actually. You guys have been very helpful and pretty supportive. This Damascus could not have gone better. Literally, it just like worked almost completely perfectly, like in almost everything I did. Few delaminations at the start, but I was able to get those completely out and it just worked like so amazingly. Thank you for watching to the end. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. But until then, have a great rest of your day.